So welcome back guys to the campaign. What we're going to do is start off with a little bit of a recap of turn 6, but if you haven't already, please do like and subscribe so you don't miss out. So the end of turn 6, the parliamentarian armies are more or less in good shape overall. Fairfax has taken a few hits here and there. Cromwell's army did suffer a lot last turn in their fighting withdrawal, but overall not too terrible. The Royalists, Charles's army is fresh. Rupert's army recovering. It did suffer 2 turns ago, but it's starting to get back there. And the other 2 forces are fresh. So overall, both sides in relatively good health. The lay of the land was that Fairfax was coming down through Hereford, and Rupert is in Gloucester, and that was their main drive. So what we saw was the parliamentarians gain the initiative and they started marching in on Rupert, whilst Cromwell and the other forces all moved in as much as they could to try and provide support to Rupert. So the second Battle of Gloucester, or at least Gloucestershire I should say. So both armies are pretty large, as you can see. We've got Rupert, Charles and Sir Edward, and their army, as you can see here on the left, we've got Rupert, who's going to be deployed first. Then on the right there we've got Charles and Sir Edward coming up. For the parliamentarians, again Fairfax and William Waller will be deploying together, and then Cromwell will be coming up as reinforcements. And we've got sort of Cromwell on the right hand side and Fairfax and Waller as that sort of centre left block. So 2 pretty powerful armies for both sides. The Royalists do have a numerical superiority, but they will be split. Obviously Rupert will be there turn 1 against Fairfax and Waller. Turn 3, I believe, is when Cromwell arrived and Charles. And then Sir Edward, I think he arrives on turn 6. So yeah, the numbers will grow. So with our initial deployment, we had both sides just lining up. There had to be at least 6 away from the river. And we saw movement from both sides advancing straight towards one another. So turn 1 overall was a turn of manoeuvre. Both armies did a little bit of movement. The Royalists predominantly stayed put. They were in a pretty good defensive position. Troops semi-concealed in the fields. Cavalry on their left, very strong. Whilst the parliamentarians, they had to come on to try and close with them, to try and drive them from the field. There were a few casualties from the artillery. The Royalist commanded shot advanced and started pouring some fire into the parliamentarian arquebusiers. So yeah, a few minor casualties suffered. The artillery does have quite a morale-breaking effect, so that always helps to soften up the enemy. But overall, turn 1 wasn't too bad for either side. No commanders got wounded, just a few light casualties, cohesion loss. So then, as we moved into turn 3 and 4, again we kind of saw a bit of the same again. It was still manoeuvre. The parliamentarians still stuck on the right hand side of the river, whilst the Royalists brought up a pike block. So my option to try and cross and attack was then pretty well mitigated. In the centre, I was playing as the parliamentarians. I pushed to the river and started to try and cross, although in these rules crossing the rivers basically takes an entire turn, so it does severely slow your forces down. There was a good bit of small arms fire being exchanged. As he moved forwards, he came into closer range for my artillery, which is always nice, but still not too many casualties overall inflicted at this stage. This is when the small arms, the musketeers, started to get some good shots off, and they did actually bring down a few troops on the Royalist side, and likewise when they fired back they brought down a few of us. Battle reached overall and saw our reinforcements coming through. Earlier on I said that the reinforcements arrived on turn 3. No, I was mistaken. So we had all of Cromwell's troops arriving, and we also had all of King Charles. In the centre, I wasn't expecting it. He started to advance through the stream towards my cavalry, so wasn't expecting that at all. The pikes started to do their pusher pikes on the right wing. My cavalry were across the river and got charged by his cav, so it was a very messy situation. Yeah, it was a very interesting turn, and lots of casualties started to mount, let's put it that way. And there's Cromwell's forces just in the corner. So now we were both taking small arms fire, up close and personal. So casualties were mounting, cohesion was being lost. Here in the river crossing, I stopped my troops, my musketeers, and then they could start pouring on some fire onto his slow-moving pikes, try and whittle them down before they closed with and annihilated my troops. Our musketeers on both the wings just started blasting away, carried on pouring in the fire. But it was a pretty bloody turn, I'm not going to lie. Both sides did start to suffer some pretty hectic and heavy losses. His pikemen were able to destroy ours. Our guys were just caught in the river and weren't able to withdraw, so we lost an entire unit of parliamentarian pikes. However, the parliamentarian cavalry on the right wing broke through in two places, forcing the royalists back. However, on the right hand side in this picture, they did halt us, and it was kind of a draw, so we'll carry on the next turn. But overall, infantry-wise, this turn definitely goes to the royalists. Cavalry-wise, definitely goes to the parliamentarians. Although we did both suffer, as I said, heavy casualties. So as you can see here, you've got Cromwell's troops moving up towards the river, and you've got some of Charles's moving down as well to try and cut us off. And with the fighting more or less drawn out, with most of the units either routed or destroyed, the royalist musketeers started to withdraw into the woods slightly, and so that way they could put some fire on, whilst the parliamentarian cavalry that had survived started to swing round into position. But yeah, casualties on both sides, pretty horrific, I'm not going to lie. So as we moved into turns 7 and 8, both of the original forces, that's Fairfax and Rupert's, their forces were pretty well spent. I was still doing a bit of a push to try and take out his musketeers, but having lost most of my ranged units on that side of the river, it was costing me every time I tried to manoeuvre, so it was hard for the parliamentarians to catch them. It was slippery. Further down, you had Cromwell's troops moving up to try and get to the river, and you also had Charles. It was a race who can get there first. Charles's cavalry started to forward to come over, so that's why you have Cromwell's troops, his cavalry, also advancing towards them to try and contest that crossing. We did manage to break and rout his commanded shot and pike troops that had crossed earlier with small arms fire, but again he's got musketeers advancing to replace them, so all along the line units break, but then now there's reinforcements to replace them, so it's a very tricky situation. So we got to the end of the game. We kind of decided at that point that in game time we were approaching night time, so the battle would naturally start to peter out, especially as we're basically in the winter, but also both of the original armies were spent, and we didn't really feel that either of the new armies would be in a position within the game turns that were left to actually do much more than inflict a few ranged casualties. So we decided that we'd end it, and we decided it was a draw. Both sides had lost comparable casualties. Main point which we have to note is that Prince Rupert was killed in the fighting. He got hit by an artillery ball and killed outright, so that is quite devastating to the royalists. But overall, it was, relatively speaking, a draw in regards to cohesion loss and damage taken. So a very interesting battle. Hard, very hard. So with the battle over, it was time to figure out what was going to happen, and the parliamentarian armies combined but headed north. So that was the end of that period. You've now got the parliamentarian army sandwiched between the royalists, so they're not in a particularly enviable position. Casualties sustained for the armies pretty bad on both sides, as you can see by the casualty numbers there, or the cohesion loss there. And now with the loss of Prince Rupert, we will need a new commander. So now it comes to what are we going to do next. Really, from the royalist perspective, I think if we get the initiative, we need to just strike straight for them from the north and the south. We could split and send a smaller force over, sort of on a flanking march to try and prevent them from escaping, or we could even detach a smaller force to head south to try and occupy more territory. From the parliamentarians, we really need our Scottish forces to come down and merge so that they can lend support, and the parliamentarians could try and withdraw to the east or to the west into Wales. They're probably the two most logical routes. Or we could just go on the offensive and try and strike at Shrewsbury. We've got more troops. Shrewsbury is a smaller force. I think there's only about 4 or 5 royalist units in that force, so that is an option. But hey, they're what I've come up with. Let me know in the comments down below and we'll get the poll up shortly. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Leave some comments down below as to what you thought about the turn and what you think we need to do next, and I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. See you later. Thanks guys.